Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about 5 most important concepts you need to know before you start writing JavaScript for React and React Native. Without further ado, let's dive into the video.
Unleashing creativity through coding.
Okay, so welcome back guys. So the 5 concepts you're going to be tackling are 1. How to run JavaScript code in the terminal using Node. 2. Variable initiations and data types. 3. Arrays and objects. 4. Conditional statements and ternary operators. And then finally, we are going to talk about functions and methods. First thing on the list is how to run JavaScript code in a terminal using Node. As already mentioned in my introduction video, Node.js is a JavaScript runtime that allows you to run JavaScript code off the website or off your browser, but this time in your terminal to check if your code is running correctly. So in our case, we already have Node.js installed, and if you don't have Node.js installed, I'll leave your link in the description below so that you can also get access to it. Okay, so now how do we access Node to run our JavaScript file? As you can see, I have a JavaScript file open called tutorial.js in my VS Code, and then to run the file you have to open your VS Code terminal. In this case, my terminal is already opened, but how do we know that we have Node.js installed on our machine? So before everything, you have to do node-v, then you check if Node.js is properly installed. If it is, then you're going to get this same version or the later version you downloaded. If not, you're going to get an error, so you try to refer back to the old video and then try to download and install Node.js properly. So if you have Node.js installed, that is the first step to running your JavaScript code in your terminal. So the second thing to note is the path of which you've saved your JavaScript file. So as in mine, I've saved mine on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my directory into my desktop. Then I'll wait, because it is not in a folder or it doesn't exist in another folder. I can run it directly in the desktop path. So all I have to do to run it is node, then I'll do tutorial.js, then I press enter, and then it's going to run the file. But as you can see here, our file is pretty empty. So let's write our first code and try to run it. Mostly, I know you've heard of hello world. Mostly the first code a programmer learns before everything is how to print out hello world. So in our case, hello world in JavaScript is going to be console.log. Then you bring your parentheses, then let's call out a string. So you bring in your quotation marks and then you add your text. Hi there, subscriber. Okay, so back to your terminal, you do node tutorial.js. So anytime you want to run your JavaScript code in your terminal, you have to do node tutorial.js, then you press enter. Then as you can see here, the text existing in our console log has been logged into our VS Code terminal. Hi there, subscriber is what is also here. If I change subscriber to hi there, Theo, then I come back and then I run it. I press up to bring up the old code, press enter, then as you can see, hi there, Theo. So this is basically how to run JavaScript in your terminal. Now let's move on to the next concept. Okay, so the next concept on the list is data types and variable initiation. Okay, so with data types and variable initiations, they are basically the basics of programming and the basics of every programming language, which is you are supposed to know the syntax of every programming language. For example, how console.log prints out our string into our terminal, print is also going to do the same thing for Python. So in JavaScript, printing out or logging out anything you want goes with console.log, but in Python it's print, which means they have different syntax. And in this case, you are going to learn how the syntax for naming variables work, and then the types of data that we have in programming and JavaScript as a whole. Okay, so in our case, you are going to be talking about three main data types. So the first data type we are going to talk about are strings. The next is going to be integers, and then the next is going to be boolean. Okay, so these are the three basic data types that we have in programming in general. So in other programming languages, there has been a breakdown in integers, of which we have doubles, long, and other stuff. So in those specifically typed programming languages, you would have to indicate if that specific integer is a double, which is any number with a decimal point, or a long, or any other thing. But in JavaScript, we deal with these three basic data types. So let's see how we can initiate these data types and associate them with variables. As you know, variables are data stored on a specific location on the RAM, of which we can access in any point in our code. So in this case, if you want to initiate a variable, we have three main keywords we use in JavaScript. So the first keyword we use in JavaScript is let, the second is var, and the third is const. But mostly I don't see a lot of people using the var keyword anymore, because people are saying it's archaic and other stuff. So in our case, I'm just going to be using the let and the const, because that is what you are mostly going to be seeing in your React and React Native projects. So in this case, let's see how the data are being initiated into variables. And then, as you know, every variable is represented by a variable name. So before you name your variable, you bring your let or your const, then you give the name of the variable. For example, we say let name. So in this case, our variable name is name. Let name equals, then you bring your string, which is your quotation marks, and then you put your string inside the quotation marks. Let's say my name is Derek, so let's make the name Derek. Okay, so this is the variable initiation for string, which is the string of Derek. So Derek is stored on a specific location in the RAM, and then that location is specified as name for the computer to get easy access to. So in case you write a code somewhere and then you want to refer to the name Derek, instead of opening your quotation marks and writing back Derek, you can just call the variable name here, and then it is automatically going to provide the Derek for you. So for example, let's try initiating an integer. Now an integer goes the same as you let, then let's say age, then is equal to. So integers are not represented in quotation marks. In JavaScript, anything you represent in quotation marks is termed as a string. So numbers are not initiated in quotation marks. If you initiate them in quotation marks, they are going to be considered as strings. So in this case, you cannot perform any operation on that specific variable. So in our case, let's do 19. So this is how the variable initiation for an integer goes. And let's see what a boolean is. A boolean is basically true or false, a yes or a no concept. So in case you want to use conditional statements and then you want to refer to the validity of a statement, it is true or false that you are going to be using most of the time. So to declare this, you can say let is modified equal true. Okay, so as you can see, id is modified because it is mostly the basic variable name convention used for booleans. I don't know why, but I've seen a lot of people doing it, and then they mostly exist in a lot of code base that have been inside. So this is how mostly names given to booleans are represented. So booleans are just true or false. I can change this from true to false, and then this is a boolean. As you can see, if I come here and then I hover, you can see that is modified and then the type being boolean. If I come to the second line, age, as you can see, is a number or an integer. Then we come to the name, and then as you can see here, it says it's a string. So this is basically variable initiation. So let's go to the next keyword, const, and let's see the difference between const and let. Const is basically constant. The const keyword basically represents a constant. So for example, if I set the age with the let variable to 19, I can also set the age variable again to be equal to something else, and then the code that comes beneath the first one is going to be the one that's considered. But when you use the const variable, it makes the keyword you are going to initiate a constant, which means you cannot change this variable name to any other number or any other data type in any point of the code, because it is a constant, like the Earth's gravitational constant. You cannot change it, you cannot tweak it, which means when you use the const, it means you want what you are initiating to that specific variable stick and then not be changed in any point in your code. Okay, so guys, basically this is data types and variable initiation. Now let's talk about arrays and objects. Okay, so let's first talk about arrays. What are arrays? Arrays are a series of specific data types or different data types stored in one variable, and then they can be accessed by their indexes, which are the positions of which they exist in that array. So array is just a normal variable, for example, a const of names. But in this case, you don't initiate one specific data value and relate it to the names. But in this case, you give multiple or different names to be represented with the names, and then if you want to access them, we access them with their indexes. So now let me give you an example so that you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, so to initiate an array, you need a square bracket. When you open your square bracket, all your items that are going to exist in this square bracket are supposed to be differentiated with a comma to show that this is the end of this string, and then it moves on to this. So for example, the names, you can have Derek as a name, move out of your quotation mark, a comma, you can have Francis, you can have Keldrick, and many other names that you want to add up. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the index or the positioning is what you're going to be using to affect each and every item in an array. So the positioning of an array starts with the index of 0. So every time you initiate an array, the first object or the first item that exists in an array has an index of 0. The next one has an index of 1, the next one of 2, and so on. So mostly people get confused by the indexes and call the first one 1. But in case you print out in your terminal, you're going to realize that it's going to print out the second item in the array instead of the first. So in case you want to access one name out of this variable, you have to use the index, of which let's do console.log, open up parentheses, and then to access anything in a variable, you use the variable name instead of that specific thing. So we copy the name here, then we paste it here, and then if I run these names, it's only going to give us the 3 names that exist in the array. Then we don't want that. In our case, we want to print only Derek from the array list. So if you want to do that with the variable names, you bring a square bracket in front of it, and then this square bracket accepts only the index or the positioning of that object or that item in the array. So in this case, you want to access the array item with the index of 0, which is Derek. So if I put 0 inside the square bracket in front of the names variable, let's try run it and see what happens. So I do it. Yeah, so as you can see here, the name Derek has been fetched out of the whole array and has been printed out because of the specification of the array index of 0. So let's try the array index of 2. So let me bring this up for you to see clearly. Let me bring the code back, enter. Now as you can see, Keldrick with the index of 2 has been printed inside this terminal. So basically you are going to meet a lot of array initiations in React and React Native, because mostly you are going to be storing your data into arrays and then access them in different points in your code. So what are objects? Okay, so objects are basically arrays, but they are initiated in a different way, and then they are in a way given variable names. I know this is a little confusing. Let me give you an example and then see what I'm trying to mean. Let's try to name an object person. Okay, so person is our object. You bring our equal to, instead of using a square bracket for an array, we use a curly brace for an object. So in this case, our object is a person. So we want to accept the name of the person, the age of the person, and then if the person is a male or a female, so we say gender person. So in our case, we are going to initiate a value to the name, a value to the age, and then a value to the gender, so that in case we are accessing it, we don't use indexes to represent the items in an object, but we use the names to represent them, as in we use variable names to represent variables. So in this case, our name, to initiate anything existing in an object, takes a semicolon instead of an equal to. So you bring a semicolon, you give your space, quotation marks, then Derek. So we come down here, how old is Derek? You can see Derek is 19. Then what is the gender of Derek? You can see Derek is a male. Okay, so basically this is an object, and then the difference between the array and then the object is that if you want to access the age in the person's object, you do console.log, then instead of bringing person and then an index, you do person, then you bring a full stop. As you can see here, there has been a suggestion of the items that exist in the object. So let's try doing person.age and then run it in a terminal and see what happens. Yeah, as you can see here, 19 has been printed because person.age is a reference to 19 in our code. So the difference between an object and an array is that an object has an existing sub-variable name associated to it and makes it easier to access it than that of the array, of which we use indexes. So basically that is it for objects and arrays. So next, let's talk about conditional statements and ternary operators. Okay, so before I continue guys, make sure you hit on the like button, subscribe to my channel and ring the notification bell so that in case I upload any new content, you receive it immediately. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about are conditional statements and ternary operators. In our case, the only conditional statements you are going to be talking about are if and if else statements, which are conditional statements that help you render objects or items when a specific condition has been met. So for example, if we want to print Michael is a great guy if person.name is equal to Michael, you say if, then you bring your parentheses, your condition goes here, then you bring your curly braces, then your code will exist here. So the parentheses, you need to bring out your condition so that if the condition is met or the condition has been met, you are going to run the code that exists inside the if block. And then if you have an else statement, you can do an else attached to that, then another one. So if the condition of the if block is not reached, then it's going to move on to printing out the condition for the else block. So in this case, let's take this out. That's what's flagging the error. Let's take this out. So in our case, we want to see if person dot name in our case is equal to, as you can see, I've given two equal signs because when you use one equal sign, it's assigning a variable name to a variable. So because of that, if you are trying to equate something to something, or you are trying to check if something is equal to something, we use double equal sign. And then we don't only have equal to in our conditions initiation. We can have equal to or less than, we can have less than or equal to, then we can have less than, we can have greater than. But in this case, we want to use equal to. So you bring equal to and say if the string existing in person.name is equal to Michael, we want to console log he's a great guy, else if the name is not equal to Michael, we want to print console.log, then we give a string wrong name. Okay, so let's run this code and see what happens. Pull up the terminal, node tutorial.js, then press enter. So as you can see here, because the name existing in the person.name string is Michael and is equal to the string here Michael, he's a great guy, has been printed out. So let's try to tweak the name Michael and see what happens. Let's put Derek instead. So let's try running this code again and see what happens. So as you can see, wrong name has been printed out in our terminal because the first condition wasn't met. So automatically wrong name is going to be printed out, because if this is wrong, this is what you are telling our PC to print out. So basically that's it for conditional statements. Now let's come to ternary operators. Ternary operators are not basically used in raw JavaScript code like this. They are mostly used in React and React Native, because writing an if-else block like this in React and React Native is really going to mess up your code and going to make it look a little bulky. Because of that, ternary operators were introduced. The else block is going to be initiated, or if it's just an if statement, nothing will be initiated. And then we also have the end operator, so the end, so the or operator, sorry. So if you use this, it means if name person.name or person.age is equal to the condition, so if at least one of them is equal to the condition, then your first block will be initiated, else your else block will be initiated. So in case we want to compare two different conditions on one specific action, for example, let's say if person.name end, so use the end person.age is equal to a condition, it's going to make sure that if what is represented in person.name and what is represented in person.age are both equal to the condition here, the first block is going to be initiated. But if even one do not agree with React and React Native, ternary operators are mostly represented in curly braces as I have opened. So in case you want to see if person.name is equal to Michael, print out he's a great guy, we are going to see person.name, you bring a question mark to represent if person.name, the question mark represents then we want to see console.log he's a great guy, Then if you want to add an else to this statement, you go out of your console.log and bring a semicolon. So after your semicolon, anything you print out there is going to be printed if the first condition hasn't been stated. You can also do if person.name is equal to Michael. It also works this way. Or if it is less than or equal to Michael, or if it is less than Michael, then you do this, else you do this. So ternary operators are basically the shorthand made form for if statements or conditional statements to be easily written in React and React Native code. Now let's talk about the last concept. Okay, so the last thing to talk about is functions or methods. Functions are the same as methods. So functions are just blocks of code that perform a specific task. For example, this is how a function is mostly written in React or React Native. So you bring your keyword, then you bring the name of the function. In this case, I'm going to make it my function. Then after that, you give a space, you bring your equal to, you open your parentheses, you come out, you give an arrow which is an equal to and then a greater sign, then you open it in a curly braces. So when you're in the curly braces, whatever code you write in here is going to be the functional method for this function, my function. So for example, if I want this function to accept properties from another function, there's something called props in React and React Native. I'll just open another curly braces here, then I'll add the name of the props in here. So for example, I want to accept the prop, a name separated by a comma, an age separated by a comma, then maybe the gender of the person. So in this case, I would have to export these props from the other component or the other function so that I can use it here. So in case I call that function in here, I can directly input variables or values for these variables. Input values for these variables. So in the original code for these variables, you do not actually assign anything to them. You just give them this name and then assign them to props, which are properties of which you can call them in another function as I have done here, and then use it in any part of your code. But let's talk about the basic function that people mostly use. We have the function, then we have the name, let's say my function, then your opening parenthesis comes, then the curly braces come. So with a function like this, you can say, for example, in this case, I want to accept A and B. So okay, so if A and B are accepted, I want to return, for example, let's say A plus B. A plus B. So in this case, if I run this code, nothing is going to happen here because the only thing I've given to this function is that I've given it values and props that I can call in other functions or in other callbacks so that I can use them. So for example, if I want to print anything of addition or I want to add any numbers, I can call this function by saying my function. Let's try to console log that. Let's console log. Okay, so the name of your function, my function, then I'll open a parenthesis here, then I'll give the numbers I want to perform the addition on. So I can say 12, 13. So in this case, you don't have to do 12 plus 13 anymore. You just have to input the actual numbers inside the function to represent the props given A and B. So in this case, let's try to run this code and see what happens. So let me bring this up a little, and I'll do cd desktop, and I'll do node tutorial tabs. So as you can see, there has been an addition performed on 12 plus 13, of which 12 plus 13 is 25. So basically, functions are just blocks of code that performs a specific task, of which you can use in any part of your code. So in React and React Native, these functions are called components. So you can build all your components in separate functions or separate methods, and then call them and use them in any page of your application of which that you need. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. And then after this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching React Native by cloning some popular UI or some popular apps that you know out there. So in case you want me to clone any React Native app or any React Native UI that you find somewhere, please tell me in the comment section below, and then I'll contact you. Then you give me what you want me to clone, and then I will do it in this video series. So thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.